Hi, welcome to the channel. I'm Luke. I live in the West Midlands in the UK with my partner and our two small children, and we're on a mission to live a more frugal, minimal, and simple life so we can maximise the things that really matter to our family. In this video, I want to talk about spending and more how we spend and what we used to spend with. And I really want to focus on the good old fashioned, and I've got my wallet here, and in that wallet is good old fashioned cash, physical cash. And while we've been on this frugal journey over the last 12 to 18 months, cash has become a part of our lives more so than probably in the decade previous to that. I'm in my early 30s, so I've grown up with chip and pin, contactless payments, the threshold for those contactless payments getting higher, and Apple Pay and tapping with your watch. And so cash has always seemed to me to be a bit old-fashioned, a bit inconvenient. Why would I want to go to the bank to take some money out to then go to a shop to pay for something when I could just go to the shop? And yeah, that was always my thinking on cash. I just felt it's very old-fashioned, very much for previous generations. And I suppose all those points are valid, actually, you know, but there's the other side of the coin, which is there are some real benefits to using cash. And as a society, if we use cash less and less, and as individuals, if we use cash less and less, there's some interesting and largely negative consequences to that in how we view money, how we spend money, and how we control our personal finances. So for me, one of the big reasons for using cash is intentionality. There's no mind games, there's no putting it on that card or putting a bit on that card or using a Klarna payment or whatever it is. If I want a good or a service for £20, I hand over £20. In that transaction, I'm thinking, is that worth my money? Is that the best use of my money? Am I getting something decent back in return? And there's some real thought process about the transaction, some real intentionality. When you go in a shop, and in these shops, some very clever people set them up in very clever ways for you to impulsively spend. And when you've got essentially a bottomless pit of money, largely based on credit from plastic that you can tap, those impulse purchases end up in your basket. Those clever people have done their job very well and have got you to spend. Whereas if you've only got £20, those impulse purchases can't make their way into your basket if you're already spending that £20 on something else very intentionally, which you went into the shop to buy. So that's why I do like physical cash, the handing over of something to get something back, the transaction, real intentionality. And it's worked for me. And what I do find now is actually I'm spending less because I'm questioning things of whether I really need it, or is it just a want, or is it just an impulse? So that works for me, and I think at the end of the month in particular I find that, because if I don't use cash, so each month me and Dave, we have £200 personal spend, no questions asked, do what you want with it, free money, fun money. And at the end of the month, I regularly have about £40–50 of that left. I don't tend to spend it all. And it gets to about 5 days before payday. And I start thinking, oh, what should I spend that £40 or £50 on? And I just go tapping away. I may go and get a lunch while I'm at work, £5, who cares? I'm getting paid in a few days and I've got the money. And it quickly goes over the space of a couple of days. Whereas actually, if my £200 fund money is in cash and I've got £40 left with a few days to go before the next payday, I actually realise I'm holding more onto it. I don't want to break into that. I don't want to hand that over just because I've got it and we're having a reset in a few days. I actually want to take it into the next month. So again, I find I'm wasting less, and it's a psychology of physical money, physical cash, and that want and that need to hold on to it rather than just willy-nilly handing it over. I think another aspect of why using cash works when you're trying to be frugal is because it adds an extra layer of friction into your spending. Not only have you only got a certain amount of money when you go to the shops, and you have to think about when you're in the shop, are those goods or those services that you're paying for, is that what you want to hand your money over for? Well, before you even get to the shop, you've got to go out your way to go and get cash out to the bank, then go to a physical store and buy those things. Whereas when you sat at home, online, with your phone, tap of a button, next day you can get deliveries and spend a lot of money while you're doing it. You can even get same day deliveries. You can spend your money on a takeaway. There'll be an advert on the TV for the lottery, gambling companies, fast food restaurants, for online stores where you can literally, as you're watching the TV, scroll and spend that money. Whereas actually, if you are restricted just to actual cash, you can't do that, can you? So, if you're sat there and you really would like a takeaway, but you can only spend it on cash, there's a lot of friction because you've then got to find a takeaway that accepts cash for a start, then go out and hand that cash over, come back, might be cold outside, and it's adding those layers of friction, and you probably end up deciding that you don't want that takeaway. Same as buying a product, actually if you think, oh, well, I've got to go into town tomorrow in the cold, oh, it's a bit out of my way to go and buy that product, you probably realise you don't actually want it, and it was all an impulse from the clever advertising people that have just sold that to you while you were watching TV. So I think the actual physical act of going out the house and handing cash over actually makes you question those purchases before you even get to the stores. But I think the overarching one, and I'm not too bad on this, never have been, but I think millions of people across the UK, across the Western world, are very much getting caught out on this, is that it starts with a debit card. So you tell yourself that story, that it's a bit more convenient, I haven't got to go to a cash point, I just want to make an online purchase, it's really convenient for me, and those things are absolutely valid, by the way. So I just put on my debit card, got the money in my bank, great, I'm paying for it outright, I'm not getting into debt. But then things snowball, because you might then do a purchase on a credit card. Then the line between debit and credit cards gets a little bit hazy. Then you do a second purchase on a credit card. Then you're paying for a holiday on a credit card. Then you're doing a Klarna payment or a store payment where you can pay it off in over 3 months. And you find that you don't have the cash for any of these purchases now. You couldn't pay on your debit card if you wanted to, because out your bank account you're paying for all your credit cards which you've previously been spending on, because the line between your money and money that you're borrowing, so not your money, has just blurred. I'm not a big one for the conspiracy of big money, of big banks, of the system necessarily all sat around a table and plotting and planning this, but I definitely think it's something they lean into, where the line between, by eradicating the physicality of cash, you can then start to blur the line between your cash sat in your bank account and not your cash sat in a credit card account. And as those lines get blurred, people from a very young age, that next generation coming through, their version of there being no cash isn't just using your debit card. Their version no cash is using credit and being in a lifelong cycle of credit. And before you know it, those people, 25, 35, 45, tens of thousands of pounds in debt for buying stuff they couldn't afford, because all the friction was taken out of their purchases. So they gave in to all their impulses, and they built up masses of debt. That's what happens. That's why people are getting caught out. And I look at it now as a father of 2 young children. I don't want my children doing that. I want them to use cash. I want them to understand that a credit card isn't their money. It's not free money. And that you should, if you're ever going to use those facilities, and I'm not saying using credit cards is bad, there are some times where it's useful, needed, required, beneficial in some circumstances. But I want them to understand that using those are heavy decisions and shouldn't be flippant taps of their phone because they fancied a new pair of trainers, or they fancied a McDonald's, or they fancied just whatever TikTok shop was selling them that day. So cash, I think, is really fundamental to respecting money, to respecting purchases, to respecting and understanding what you actually want and need to spend your money on. Nothing wrong with spending money. Nothing wrong with spending money on your wants as well as your needs. But spending should always be thought through. It should always be budgeted, and it should always be able to be paid. Cash is a very simple and effective way. It has been for many, many years, hundreds, thousands of years, of a way of doing that and controlling that. But over the last few decades, society has given in to convenience. And that convenience, while I think genuinely was positive and can be positive, has blurred itself into being quite sinister and trapping people in years and years of debt. So, don't let it die. Use cash. Control your spending. It really helps. I don't think there's a person that using cash wouldn't help in terms of them being able to control their spending, thinking, adding a little bit of consciousness to their spending. So I would always now advocate for using cash going forward. Not always, I don't, but make sure it's part of your spending routine. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Keep using cash, and as always, have an awesome day. Thank you for watching.